A literary great once said, "I don't think there's anybody alive that's better at dialogue than Roddy Doyle." I think that was Dave Eggers, an American author. Doyle is the tour de force celebrity Irish author, Booker Prize winner who brings tender, hardscrabble, and cocky characters to life on the page and on the stage. He is a former schoolmaster who gave up teaching back in the 80s when he wrote his debut novel, The Commitments. He brings restless Dubliner music man Jimmy Rabbit back to life in a sequel called The Guts, which proves even bad music has some power to save your life. It is my pleasure to welcome Roddy Doyle back to Vancouver. Been a long time.
It has.
So a sequel, that can be dangerous, a sequel.
Yes, it can, and I didn't see it as a sequel. It's I wrote The Commitments 28 years ago, actually, and I then wrote a lot more books, and I thought I gave up on The Commitments. I forgot that I'd written it. Actually, it was so long, and I turned my back on that whole time. I just got on with my work, you know. And it was a long, long time after that I thought it might be a good idea to bring back Jimmy Rabbit. But he wasn't going to be, 2 years after, The Commitments had broken up. And it wasn't going to be the young man eager to do the same thing all over again. So he's a middle-aged man. He's 47. When the Commitments ends, I think he's around 21. So when this book opens, he's 47. So it's an entirely different universe he's living in, I wrote the first book, The Commitments, in a time of recession in Ireland, the 1980s. And when the economy collapsed about 5 years ago in Ireland, quite spectacularly, I began to wonder what those characters, the ones who I'd come up with in the 1980s, would be, how they'd be coping or not in this new recession. I didn't want to fall back into the images of the 1980s. I wanted to think in terms of how different it would be, and I thought it would be a good idea to bring him back just to see how he's getting on.
And Jimmy, the character, is a bit tamer.
Well,
and
he's
facing
older.
a perhaps terminal illness.
Well, he's diagnosed, at the beginning of the book, he has just been diagnosed with cancer of the bowel. And I suppose about 15 years ago, when meeting friends I'd grown up with, the cancer was added to the agenda when we'd meet for a drink. It used to be, football, music, children, in one or two cases grandchildren, our work, how we were getting on. And then cancer was added to the list because there were 5 of us and now there's 4 of us. And other friends had had various forms of cancer, and some are not with us anymore, and others have lived and survived, and they're getting on fine. So I thought it'd be a good idea. It's a cruel thing, really, but he's a fictional character, so he doesn't exist. Therefore, it seemed like a good idea to give him cancer.
Good idea, bowel cancer.
Ordinarily, I wouldn't inflict it on anybody.
No. And have you ever had it?
No, I haven't. But it struck me, I wanted to capture a year in his life, and I thought if I give him something like this at the beginning of that particular year, he has to confront a lot of questions that we do as we get older anyway, except it's all condensed into a very short time. So these moments, he already feels a little bit redundant as a father, for example. His 2 older children are, on the cusp of adulthood, and he's not sure how to deal with that, whereas life used to be very, very simple as a very active and loving father. So he feels a little bit redundant in that way. So I think people with children would recognize that, and we all come across these feelings of redundancy and change as we get older. But I suppose if you're faced with the possibility that you're not going to be around this time next year, these questions queue up. So that's why in a way I inflicted this thing on him, just to allow him through the experience and to come out the other side, and to ask himself in a way, what'll I do with the rest of my life?
And who do you tell, and how do you tell people about a diagnosis like a cancer? You're terrified.
Yeah. He doesn't want to bring the word into the house. He feels guilty about it, and I suppose that's quite a common feeling. He doesn't blame himself as such, but he really doesn't want to bring that word and what it implies into the house. He has children, his youngest child is 10. So he actually tells his father first. And it's several days after he's being diagnosed before he gets around to telling his father. He just doesn't want to.
Yes.
He knows this is the correct. He just doesn't want to use the words.
Tells his dad, and of course his dad uses a lot of profanity, as does he.
Yes.
The F word and the C word a lot.
Yeah. Am I supposed to justify that, or?
Can you spell it?
I certainly can, but you don't want me to. Yes, it's part of the rhythm of their language. There's very, very rarely any violence in it. It's just part of the rhythm of their language, and they use it sometimes to great comic effect.
very much, and a little black humor thrown in.
Well, I hope the book is very funny. That was the plan, that, you know, you take a character, throw him into a recession, give him cancer and make it a very funny book. Because that's his outlook on life, and it's the outlook of life. And it's quite common in Ireland, and I suppose elsewhere, you know. The jokes start immediately. The bad news is accompanied by the jokes.
And the jokes help get you through.
Well, they help in a way. Now, it's not going to necessarily mean you'll survive, but it actually, you go down laughing, so to speak.
Well, his wife, Aoife,
Yeah.
gives him the Dummy's Guide to Chemo and Radiation.
Yes. Yeah, which is great, I think. And he gets the joke as well. It arrives gift wrapped, you know, Amazon, the cardboard. So it's always quite a thrill to get something in cardboard, and he opens it up, and it's chemotherapy and radiation for dummies, and that book does exist. And I because I was doing a bit of research, I didn't want to become in any way sort of a gentleman oncologist or an expert on anything, and I felt Jimmy's approach to the whole cancer would be just to get on with it, and not to. He's not good at Latinate names and remembering things, so he just wants to get on with it, get through it, and survive.
And if you have chemo, you have radiation, can you have sex? And if you have sex after surgery, what happens? All of the questions that people have.
Yeah, but I suppose, you know...
Written here.
Yeah, but the Dummies books are very American in their outlook, and they're very kind of look in the mirror and say, I will survive, and you know, that doesn't really work in Ireland. Because if you work, you know, you look in the mirror in Ireland and you just, you know, oh God, you know, I don't want to look. So that kind of feel good about yourself thing doesn't come natural. So, so I delved into the book a bit and looked at it and took the odd note, but I decided if Jimmy was the character looking in this book, he'd give up on it very quickly. But then I thought, you know, because often, very often in movies and things like that, the men are funny, the women aren't. The women stand back and laugh, or the women are, you know, swoon to the jokes, but they're rarely themselves funny, which is why funny women are so brilliant, you know, because they are out there, but they don't often get that voice. And there's always that stupid debate, why aren't there more stand-up women comedians, you know, as if that proved anything.
Exactly.
You know?
And one of the kids in the book says, I love when my mother swears. I love to hear our mother swear. Didn't we all?
Yeah.
You wrote a memoir about your parents. Did your mom swear?
No, she didn't, and doesn't. She will if she's relating a story that she heard, but no, she doesn't. She's not in any way, what would you say, fussy about it. She would have been now when we were children. There was that divide between street language and language in the home. But no, so she wouldn't be at all put out by it, and I think she's very happy with the way my career has gone. But no, she wouldn't swear herself. My father would occasionally, yeah.
But you started out as a school teacher,
No,
geography.
I started out as a baby, actually.
Well, you did?
I did, yeah. Then I marched relentlessly towards school teaching. It's a
School
disaster from start
eventually.
to finish. Yeah.
But did you think about being a doctor or a musician,
No, the idea of me
a
being-
trumpet player?
No, I am learning to play the trumpet, but it's only for my own edification and to entertain the dogs. But no, I had no ambitions to be like a doctor. I'm very ungainly with my hands, so I think I would have known, you know, surgery was not for me. Or performing
for me, if
it.
you're operating on me.
Yeah, performing. No, not at all.
No, dexterity's a
I drifted
factor.
into teaching. I actually had written 4 novels before I gave up teaching. I didn't give up teaching after the first novel. I loved teaching, you know. And I think more than anything else, it probably aimed me towards my style of writing.
And
try and get as many people talking as quickly as possible.
Okay, so it's towards your style, dialogue,
Yeah.
but you taught geography.
And English.
English.
But they speak English when they're talking about geography. And actually they'll speak English to avoid talking about geography. That's where the real entertainment
I got it. One of your first, and it could be your first, your granny's A Hunger Striker?
That's
political
my
satire?
That's my great unpublished dreadful novel, yeah.
Dreadful.
Dreadful.
Isn't it in the National Library?
It is in the archive of the National Library, yeah. And that's where it'll remain.
Well, when you do bad stuff, you do bad music. You were never a musician.
No.
But any musician you talk to will, I'm sure, tell you when you've listened to your original recital or your first band effort. It's pretty shocking.
Yeah. I've no regrets. I spent maybe 3 years writing that novel, and in retrospect, I see it as some sort of a rehearsal. it got a lot of things out of my system, kind of undergraduate humor and self-consciousness particularly, and this notion that every sentence has to be somehow perfectly formed with a beginning and a middle and an end. And I got that out, and immediately I started writing the book that became The Commitments, and that clicked. And I think possibly if I hadn't gone through the 3 years of writing the bad novel, I wouldn't have written what I probably think is a good one.
Perhaps. And finally, when you wrote The Commitments and self-published, right?
Yeah.
Self-published, and it was a huge breakthrough, and you decided this is what you wanted to do, but you can form a character. You have the best names of characters of almost any author I know. Like Outspan, and what's Dolores? Was it?
Dolores.
Was her name. Well, even when you talk about a dog, you said he was a cocker, a poodle, a greyhound, a little bit of an omelette.
Yeah.
Roddy Doyle, our guest, will return.